The earth looms beneath me, dark and foreboding, as I prepare for re-entry. From up here, it's nothing like the planet I left. It's almost unrecognizable. No signs of light, no sparkling cities, only vast expanses of shadow. Something feels deeply, fundamentally wrong. Even before I touch down, the descent is eerie. No contact from ground control. Dead silence on every frequency. I go through the motions, every step automatic, drilled into me over years of training, but there's a gnawing unease that won't leave my mind. The landing is smooth, though almost too smooth. As my craft settles on the ground, all systems seem to power down in unison. The usual humming and beeping stop, leaving a silence so complete it's almost deafening. Once outside the craft, I expect to be met by the familiar sounds of earth, wind, distant city noise, something. But there's nothing. It's cold and stale, like the air has been sealed off from life for ages. I look around, hoping for any sign of activity, any trace of humanity. Nothing. Every single place that should be lit up is dark, as though the world itself has forgotten light. I start moving through what was once a bustling landing base, but now it feels more like a tomb. Familiar structures loom around me, but they're not right. The metal structures, once shining, are now dulled and covered in layers of grime. The roads are cracked and uneven, weeds sprouting through the concrete as if reclaiming the land. Buildings are overgrown, abandoned, and eerily silent. The rot and decay seem almost alive, like the earth itself is swallowing everything whole, devouring the last remnants of a civilization. I reach for my comms, try different frequencies, calling out again and again, hoping for even the faintest reply. But my voice seems to vanish into the static, swallowed by the silence. With every unanswered call, a sense of isolation settles over me, growing heavier. The lack of response is unnatural, impossible. There's always someone listening, someone waiting, except now, there's no one left. I press forward, searching for signs of life. A shadow passes across my field of vision, and I spin around, but there's nothing there. Just an empty street, silent and unmoving. I tell myself it's my mind playing tricks, that after so long in space, I'm just not used to the open expanse. But the feeling lingers, like something is watching, hiding in the darkness just beyond my sight. As I wander through deserted streets, the signs of decay grow more severe. Rusted vehicles lie abandoned in the streets, their frames twisted and corroded. The buildings I pass have walls scarred with strange marks, blackened patches like scorch marks spreading across brick and stone. It's as though something violent swept through, leaving traces but no explanations. The sky is a murky gray, with clouds thick and low, casting everything in a sickly light that feels more like twilight than day. I step inside a small building, a store maybe, though it's difficult to tell with everything layered in dust and grime. Shelves are overturned, merchandise scattered on the floor as if people left in a hurry. I examine items lying on the floor, strange relics of everyday life that feel wrong, out of place. There's food untouched but spoiled, its smell faintly lingering in the air, mingling with the musty scent of decay. I step around half-empty cups of coffee, children's toys, clothes, all left behind mid-action, as if everyone just stopped. My mind races. Try to make sense of this world that feels half dream, half nightmare. What could have happened here? No war could be this quiet, this total. I remember cities alive with motion, voices, the pulse of life. Now, it's like those memories belong to someone else. A chill creeps over me. The silence is oppressive, a living thing pressing against me, filling my lungs until it's hard to breathe. I walk past a row of rusted vehicles, their headlights shattered, doors hanging open. A bus sits in the middle of an intersection, tilted to one side, as though frozen mid-turn. Its seats are empty, but I can almost feel the ghostly presence of people, their voices caught in the void, shadows of their movement lingering in the corners of my vision. Suddenly, there's a faint noise behind me. I turn, heart racing, but there's nothing, just that same barren emptiness. I continue onward, but the sensation doesn't leave me. Every so often, I catch glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision, shadows darting just out of sight. My rational mind insists it's my imagination, but the primitive part of me knows better. Something is here, something unseen but undeniably present. The longer I walk, the more the dread sinks in. Every corner I turn reveals more desolation, more emptiness. I can feel my pulse quickening, the silence itself pounding in my head. I try to shake off the feeling, remind myself that I'm alone here. Yet every instinct screams that I'm not. I begin to notice more unsettling details. Scratches on walls that don't look accidental. Patterns that resemble desperate claw marks, as if people were trying to escape from something. I move quickly past them, refusing to let my mind dwell on the possibilities. But each mark, each sign of struggle adds to the unease gnawing at me, feeding a growing fear I can't shake. The shadows deepen, lengthening in unnatural ways, bending and stretching across walls in patterns that defy logic. Each time I look away, I swear they're shifting, closing in. It's not just silence now. It's something darker, a presence lurking, coiled and waiting. I force myself to keep going, though my hands shake, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Every instinct tells me to flee, but where would I go? There's nothing but emptiness stretching out in every direction, a world lost to time, a planet abandoned by life. The isolation presses in, crushing, relentless. I am the last human here, and somehow, I know I'm not alone. The sensation of being watched, followed, hunted claws at my sanity, an invisible weight that grows with every step. There's no one here, but there's something else, and it's only just begun to reveal itself. I move deeper into the city, navigating through a maze of silent buildings. Each one is like a time capsule, frozen in a state of everyday life that feels grotesque in its sudden stillness. I step into what seems like a family home, and it's chillingly intact. Plates set on a dining table, a child's toys scattered on the floor, a coat draped over a chair. It's as if the family had only stepped out for a moment, yet there's no sign of anyone. The stillness of these objects feels accusing, each item a silent witness to a sudden, inexplicable end. As I continue, I find more remnants like this, each scene a haunting snapshot of human life suspended in time. A cup of coffee, now a hardened sludge, sits on a counter, next to a newspaper turned yellow and brittle. A notebook lies open on a desk, half filled with scrawled words that abruptly stop mid-sentence. Offices with chairs left slightly askew, as if people had risen from their seats and never returned. Schools with desks arranged neatly in rows, yet covered in a fine layer of dust, as though they'd been untouched for years. The eerie normalcy of it all grates against my mind. There's no sign of chaos or violence, no overturned furniture, no signs of a struggle, just absence. Every building I enter is a continuation of the same disturbing pattern, lives interrupted, left in such a perfect, unnerving state that it's as if the people had simply vanished into thin air. But the deeper I go, the more the remnants become sinister, like some invisible hand has swept away all life with surgical precision. Outside, I begin to notice strange markings on the ground, scorched black lines that snake across the pavement and disappear into the walls of buildings. The scorch marks look wrong, twisted into unnatural patterns that hint at something beyond human comprehension. Some are spirals, curling inward like they're pulling something into an unseen center, while others form jagged, erratic lines that make my skin crawl just looking at them. They're seared into walls, floors, even trees. Whatever left these marks wasn't natural. It moved through here, leaving a path of destruction that seems both deliberate and cold. Strewn along the ground, I find clothing, shoes, bags, all lying as though people simply stepped out of them. Jackets still have the shape of the arms that once filled them, Purses lie open with contents spilled, but there are no signs of bodies or any human remains. Just hollow shells of lives abandoned in a single, terrifying moment. The air feels colder around these items, as though they've absorbed the fear of those who left them behind. Whatever happened, it was swift and merciless. As I move through this ghost town, I notice something strange. Certain areas look as though they've aged 100 years, buildings crumbling, windows shattered, and plants reclaiming the land. But others appear untouched, almost new, like time itself is fragmented, suspended in different states. One block looks preserved, as though I could step back into a functioning world, while the next street over is rotting, the smell of mildew and decay thicken the air. It's like reality itself has been disrupted, time warped into chaotic loops that trap these places in conflicting eras. My steps echo unnaturally loud, the silence amplifying every sound, every creak of floorboards and shuffle of my footsteps. Then, faintly, I hear something, a low, almost imperceptible whisper. At first, I think it's just the wind slipping through cracks in the walls, but the sound is rhythmic, deliberate. I freeze, straining to listen, and I can just make out fragments, words drifting on the air, too faint to fully grasp. They come and go, vanishing before I can make sense of them, but they feel close, uncomfortably close, like someone's breathing just over my shoulder. I turn, but the hallway behind me is empty. The whispering stops, and the silence floods back in, thicker and heavier. Every nerve in my body is on edge, senses stretched to their limit, picking up the faintest noises. I start moving again, but the whispers return, slipping through the walls and floors, dancing at the edges of my hearing. They don't sound like any language I know, more like a collection of sounds formed into something nearly human. Each whisper feels like a warning, a desperate plea or a warning echoing from somewhere far away, or perhaps not far enough. It's as though the city itself is alive, holding the memories of everyone who vanished here, their voices twisted into fragments, endlessly repeating. The whispers grow louder as I pass certain buildings, almost like they're following me, clinging to me, begging to be heard. I feel their presence pressing in, close but invisible, lingering just out of reach. It's maddening, each step bringing me deeper into a nightmare that seems to have no end, only layers of horror waiting to be uncovered. A flicker of movement catches my eye, a shadow, darting out of sight around a corner. I stop, holding my breath, waiting for it to appear again, but nothing moves. I tell myself it's just my mind playing tricks, that isolation and fear are causing hallucinations. But deep down, I know that's not true. There's something here with me, something watching, hiding in the shadows, slipping through the cracks of this broken reality. I approach a church, its doors creaking open as I step inside. The pews are empty, lined in neat rows, but I can feel a presence, as if the walls themselves are holding a vigil for those who never returned. The altar is covered in a thin layer of ash, like the remnants of some final ceremony performed in haste. The stained glass windows are cracked, letting in slivers of dim, gray light that cut through the dust in eerie shafts, illuminating empty seats and scattered belongings. I can almost hear faint echoes of voices, prayers caught in the stillness, hanging in the air like ghosts. Outside, the whispers follow me, circling closer, each sound dragging across my senses like claws. They're more insistent now, louder, almost clear enough to understand, but they blur into one another, overlapping in a maddening cacophony that scrapes at the edges of my sanity. It's not just whispers anymore. There are footsteps, soft and shuffling, matching my pace as I walk. Every time I stop, they stop, waiting, watching. The sky above is darkening, the last of the murky light fading, casting long shadows that seem to stretch and twist of their own accord. The whispers intensify, growing louder and faster, like a swarm surrounding me, pressing in from every side. It feels as though they're pulling me, drawing me deeper into the heart of this forsaken city, beckoning me towards something unspeakable. I'm not alone here, not really. Whatever remains of humanity is here, trapped in this place, lingering like shadows in the periphery. I feel them all around me, a presence that's both hollow and suffocating, a remnant of lives stolen away in an instant. The weight of it crushes down on me, the knowledge that I am surrounded by what used to be human, echoes of a world that has been erased, and now I'm a part of it. The silence is oppressive, weighing down on me as I push deeper into the ruins. But suddenly I see it. The street ahead shifts, becoming a bustling crowd, people filling the space where moments ago there was only emptiness. A flash, like a memory surfacing, floods my mind, vivid and too real to ignore. I see people's faces, twisted in terror, all looking up at something bright in the sky. There's shouting, confusion, the sense of impending doom. I blink, and it's gone. Just an empty street again, silent as death. But the image lingers in my mind, as if I'd stepped into a piece of their last moments, a sliver of their terror hanging in the air, preserved like an echo. I try to shake it off, but as I continue, more images flicker at the edges of my vision. Families running, children crying, faces staring upward, illuminated by an unnatural light that seems to pulse with a cold, indifferent energy. It doesn't feel like a memory. It feels like I'm witnessing something that's still happening, some broken piece of time replaying in a loop. My head throbs, the disorienting visions growing more intense, like fragments of a nightmare bleeding into reality. I stumble forward, feeling an inexplicable pull toward a large, derelict building looming in the distance. The closer I get, the thicker the air feels, almost suffocating. Shadows flit just beyond my sight, shapes that seem almost human, but wrong. Their movements are unnatural, jerky, as if they're struggling to hold form. I catch glimpses of twisted limbs. Faces blur like they're trapped in some distorted memory of themselves. The first figure I see clearly stops me cold. It stands at the edge of an alley, half-formed, its face a twisted, melting resemblance of a human, eyes sunken and wide, mouth open in a silent scream. It looks at me, or through me, like it's trying to recognize something in me. My skin prickles with cold, and an overwhelming exhaustion washes over me, like the figure is draining something from me simply by existing in my line of sight. I force myself to move, breaking eye contact, but I can feel it watching me long after I've turned away. As I move deeper into the city, I begin to find markings on walls, symbols carved into the stone, painted in faded, desperate strokes. The words are scattered, frantic, sentences half-finished or spiraling into nonsense. Yet I can make out enough to piece together fragments. They came, taken, the others. One message is scrawled in a shaky hand, barely legible but chillingly clear. Do not trust the light. The warnings grow more cryptic, more desperate, and a dark realization begins to settle over me. Whoever wrote these messages wasn't simply afraid. They were trapped, held here, waiting for something inevitable, something inescapable. We are the last echoes. Another wall reads, the words smeared and hurried, as if written by someone who knew they were running out of time. My mind starts to unravel, reality slipping with each new discovery. I can feel the weight of unseen eyes, watching me, judging me. My footsteps echo as I walk through empty corridors, and with each step, I feel like I'm sinking, being pulled deeper into whatever nightmare consumed this city. I can't tell where I am anymore. Everything blends together. The whispers, the symbols, the figures and the shadows, all coalescing into a single, suffocating mass that presses down on me. Then, I hear something, a faint voice, barely more than a whisper, calling my name. It's close, too close, like someone is breathing directly into my ear. I whirl around, but there's nothing, just a heavy silence and the distant sound of my own heartbeat. I tell myself it's in my head, but the voice continues, sometimes fading, sometimes so loud it drowns out everything else. It feels like it's coming from somewhere deep within, or perhaps from another time, another reality where these people still exist, calling out to me, begging me to understand what happened. Another flash, this time more vivid. I see a family huddled together, clutching each other as the sky outside fills with that same blinding, pulsating light. There's a sound, a deep, guttural hum that reverberates through everything, rattling windows and walls. The family is frozen, staring up, their faces twisted in horror as the light consumes them. And then silence. I'm left standing in the empty street, my mind reeling. These aren't just memories. They feel alive, like the remnants of a consciousness trapped here, unable to let go, unable to rest. The whispers grow louder, overlapping now, dozens of voices murmuring in a chaotic harmony that scrapes against my sanity. Each voice feels like a piece of someone who was here, an echo of their thoughts and fears left behind, circling endlessly. And with each one, I feel my own mind slipping, pulled into the same cycle of despair and dread that has trapped them here. One of the distorted figures appears again, closer this time, reaching out to me with a twisted hand. Its face is barely human, warped and stretched, its mouth opening and closing as if it's trying to say something but can't find the words. I feel a strange pull, an almost magnetic force drawing me toward it, draining the strength from my legs. I stagger back, but the figure advances, its hollow eyes locked onto mine, as though it's searching for something in me. I turn and run, pushing myself forward with every ounce of strength I have left. The whispers rise to a crescendo, following me, urging me to stop, to look, to understand. I try to block them out, but they claw at the edges of my mind, voices pleading, crying, calling for salvation that will never come. I see more figures now, lining the streets, reaching out with skeletal hands, faces twisted in anguish, their mouths moving soundlessly. They're all around me, surrounding me, pulling me into their endless nightmare. My breath is ragged, each step heavier than the last, as though the very air is fighting to keep me here. I stumble upon one last message, carved into the ground in jagged, desperate letters. We are not alone. They are here, always. A horrible realization begins to take root in my mind. These aren't just echoes. They're the souls of those who vanished, fragments of humanity left adrift in some twisted limbo, stuck between worlds. And whatever did this, whatever came down in that light, hasn't left. It's here, lurking in the shadows, feeding off the last remnants of human fear and despair, keeping these souls in an eternal, torturous loop. My vision blurs, exhaustion settling in, every nerve frayed as I grasp the terrible truth. The whispers, the figures, the visions, they're all part of a single entity, something ancient, malevolent, that took everything from this world. And now, it's aware of me. I feel it, a dark, oppressive presence pressing down, watching, waiting, feeding. In that moment, I realize that I am no longer just an observer in this nightmare. The whispers begin to form words, voices blending into a single phrase, a single thought that echoes in my mind. Join us. And as I sink to my knees, feeling my own thoughts slipping away, I understand. I am not the last human here. I am the last to join them. The final echo in a world where humanity's end was only the beginning. My mind reels as I stumble across an old, abandoned facility, a place untouched by the horrors outside. The air here is thick, carrying the stale scent of dust and decay, but I sense something more. Rows of screens flicker to life as I approach, each showing fragments of footage, snippets from humanity's last days. The videos are grainy, filled with desperate faces, frightened voices, chaos erupting in labs, control rooms, anywhere people gathered to seek answers. One recording captures a scientist, face hollowed with exhaustion, explaining the phenomenon that first appeared in the sky, lights moving in patterns spreading over cities. They're not just lights, he says, voice trembling. It's a presence of force. It's harvesting, draining. His words trail off, replaced by the sound of distant screams. He looks back over his shoulder, eyes wild, before the screen cuts to black. Other recordings flood the screens, each one more harrowing. Government officials in a dimly lit control room arguing in hushed tones. One of them is whispering urgently. It's an invasion of the soul, an assault on consciousness itself. We've tried every defense, but they're slipping through. The phrase, they're slipping through, echoes in my mind, dredging up a nauseating sense of doom. Their voices overlap. Overlapping in terrified confusion, their helplessness seeping through the screens. I scroll through a catalog of distress calls, civilians shouting about the lights, the voices. It's in my head. One woman screams, her voice raw and cracked. I can hear them, they're inside me. The call drops abruptly. In another clip, a man stares directly into the camera, eyes wide with terror. They're taking us. I can feel it. They're reaching inside. They're not after our bodies. They're taking everything else. I stagger back, feeling the weight of their panic pressing down on me. Suffocating, oppressive. The more I watch, the clearer the picture becomes. Humanity wasn't simply eradicated. It was consumed. An entity, ancient and vast, swept over the world like a storm, absorbing not just lives but minds, memories, every thought and dream, every shred of essence. In a single unfathomable act, it assimilated humanity, pulling it into an endless void where consciousness is trapped, eternally aware, unable to rest or escape. One final recording flickers on the largest screen, the frame filled with a scientist sitting in front of a monitor, face pale, haunted. "We thought it was just an invasion," he whispers, "something alien. But it's worse. It's something beyond what we understand, a presence that feeds on consciousness itself. We're not just dying. We're being assimilated, dissolved, our souls ripped apart and reused." His voice shakes. The voices, the echoes, that's all that's left of us now. They're us caught somewhere between life and oblivion. My vision blurs, but I can't tear myself away. The truth is too horrifying, too final. Humanity has been harvested, our very identities fractured and woven into the fabric of this presence. We're not just dead. We're fragments, pieces of thought and feeling, trapped in a network of consciousness so vast, so incomprehensible, that we become the others. The twisted shadows I've seen, the whispers, they are the remnants of us, flickering echoes caught in an endless loop of suffering, torn from their own realities and bound to this entity. The room feels colder, darker, like something is pushing against me, probing at the edges of my mind. The shadows on the screen seem to shift, reaching out, drawing closer. I realize with a horrible clarity that I'm not alone. The entity is here, watching, listening. I can feel it, an indescribable presence, vast and cold, stretching through the fabric of reality, observing me with a curiosity that feels almost hungry. In that moment, I realize what it's doing. It's studying me, feeling my thoughts, my memories. My hands begin to tremble as I sense it pushing deeper, its tendrils probing through my mind, sifting through my thoughts, analyzing every fear, every hope, every fragment of who I am. It's not enough for it to simply consume humanity. It needs to understand us, to dismantle us piece by piece, layer by layer, until there is nothing left but empty, hollow echoes. I stumble back, feeling my memories start to slip, pieces of my past breaking apart like fragments of a dream. The faces of loved ones, the sound of laughter, moments of joy, they all blur and fade, slipping beyond my reach as the entity digs deeper, extracting everything that made me human. I feel myself unraveling, piece by piece, my thoughts blurring, slipping away like sand through my fingers. And then I see them, the others. They're everywhere now, filling the room, figures twisted and distorted, mouths open in silent screams, eyes hollow and empty. They reach out to me, their fingers brushing my skin, cold and insubstantial, but the touch leaves a mark, an emptiness that spreads like ice. They're not trying to hurt me. They're pleading, trapped in an endless, wordless agony, a hollow existence that has stripped them of all memory, all identity. I feel my own mind slipping, my consciousness unraveling, drawn toward that same endless void. I see myself in fragments, reflected in the eyes of the others, as though I'm already one of them, a hollow echo caught in a perpetual state of suffering. The shadows press closer, and I can feel the entity's presence all around me, vast and empty, stretching into an infinity I cannot comprehend. I realize now that I am the last, the final piece of humanity that is yet to be consumed, assimilated, and dissolved into this unending darkness. And there is no escape, no last hope, only the certainty that I, too, will be broken apart, shredded into fragments, and scattered across this alien consciousness, just like the rest. My last coherent thought is a desperate, silent scream, a plea for release, for some end to this nightmare. But as the darkness closes in, I know there will be no end, just an endless existence as a fractured echo, one more voice in the cacophony of lost souls, bound to a fate beyond death, beyond life, caught forever in the grasp of a force that will never let go. And then nothing. I can feel my grip on reality slipping, like sand pouring through my fingers. The air is thick, oppressive, pressing down on me from all sides. My body feels weak, heavier with every step, as if the very ground beneath me is pulling me down, absorbing me into itself. Shadows blur in my peripheral vision, faces and forms half seen, shapes that flicker and fade, but their whispers remain. The words are fragmented, nonsensical, yet familiar. They sound like my own thoughts, twisted and distorted, dragging me closer to the edge. Voices call to me, desperate and pleading, a cacophony that echoes endlessly in my mind. Each one pulls a little more of me away, scattering my thoughts like brittle leaves in a harsh wind. I try to fight, to hold on to who I am, but the harder I try, the weaker I become. Time itself seems to slip, bending, repeating. I take a step forward, only to find myself back where I started, lost in a maze that has no exit. The world shifts, reshapes itself, and I'm caught in a loop that tightens around me like a vice. With a desperate surge of strength, I pull myself toward the remains of a communication tower. My hands tremble as I reach the controls, my fingers moving through muscle memory, though my mind feels distant, as if observing from somewhere far away. I type out a message, a final, desperate plea to anyone, to anything that might still be out there. If you're receiving this, you're not alone, but neither am I. My voice cracks, and I feel the weight of all the voices pressing against me, urging me to stop, to let go, to become one of them. I know it's hopeless. The shadows grow thicker, closing in from all sides. The figures, the twisted remnants of humanity, reach out, pulling me closer, their hollow eyes reflecting my own face, my own despair. But I turn, pushing myself forward one last time, stumbling through the dark streets. I don't know where I'm going, but I can't stay here. I have to escape, even if it's a futile gesture. But as I run, the streets stretch on forever, looping, turning back on themselves, every path leading me to the same haunting place. I find myself cornered, the whispers surrounding me, filling the air, filling my mind. They're not angry. They're pleading, mournful, and in their tones, I sense a painful familiarity. I'm no longer sure if they are calling me to join them, or if they're parts of me that I've already lost, fragments of my own mind, breaking off piece by piece, leaving me hollow. My body is numb now, cold, and I feel something dark and heavy seeping into my bones. It's pulling at me, unraveling me, taking apart every memory, every moment I thought was mine. I see flashes, faces of loved ones, places I've been, moments of joy, sorrow, all swirling and mixing with the voices, blending into a single, incoherent stream that I can no longer separate from myself. I feel myself fading, slipping into the same limbo that holds the others. My memories, my thoughts, all melting into a vast, endless pool of voices, each one a tiny echo of what once was. And then I feel it, a dull, numbing acceptance. The panic fades, replaced by a quiet, haunting resignation. I am becoming one of them. I am merging with the others, becoming just another echo in the endless chorus of humanity's remnants. My own voice joins the whispers, a faint, broken note in a song of despair that has no end. My last thoughts flicker, disjointed, barely holding form. I wonder if anyone will hear me, if anyone will know that I was here. But even that thought fades, dissolving into static. I realize now that I am no longer myself, no longer anything distinct. I am part of the void, part of the shadowy presence that has claimed us all. My voice joins the chorus, lost in a sea of echoes, as I become another fragment, another echo in the darkness, a piece of a shattered humanity that will linger here forever. And then silence,